Okay, I've been dying to make this video. So I went to my local bookstore and they had the blind book date. The last time I went, I accidentally had it spoiled for me. I kind of knew what it was just based off of the description. I was like, this feels like it's this certain book, and I had it spoiled for me because it comes up on the receipt and I didn't mean to look at it, but I made sure I told the cashier, like, don't let me look at this, like, please black it out on the receipt. And my boyfriend saw what it was and he was like, I know you don't know this book. It starts with an A. Those were the two hints he gave me, and I have no idea what kind of book this could be, but the description that made me want to buy it was, a Native American woman leaves her home to take vengeance upon a man who destroyed her people's land. That sounds so cool. It also seems like it's going to be a fun, not fun, but like short read, something quick. But it just based off the description with like the vengeance and things like that, it seems like it could be a book that, even though it's short, it absolutely destroys me. So I'm so excited to like reveal what it is, because I have absolutely no idea what this could be. The two hints were, I won't know what it is. My boyfriend knows that I wouldn't know it, which is weird because he also doesn't know all of the books that I know. So for him to be so confident about that. And then it starts with an A. Opening this on camera. Ooh. Okay, it was backwards. Let's look at it. That doesn't start with A. Four Souls, a novel. Louise Erdrich is the author of 11 novels, as well as volumes of poetry, children's books, and memoir. This actually does look really interesting. This does not start with A, so my boyfriend's a liar. But I don't know this book, so I'm very excited to read this. So I read it. Hi everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this video. My name is Jamie and today I'm reviewing Four Souls by Louise Erdrich. So full transparency, it has been a few months since I filmed that intro, reading off the summary of the packaging, the blind book date packaging, and I haven't rewatched it as of filming this, so I completely forget what was on the packaging, the summary that made me want to pick up this book. I believe it was something to do with like a Native woman getting her revenge against a man who stole her land, which is how this book is advertised. That's essentially what the back blurb, or the back summary says. It's just a Native woman leaving her Ojibwe reservation and going to Minneapolis and St. Paul to get revenge, but then something happens and she can't get her revenge or whatever. And that is essentially what this book is about. But I have some other thoughts that I want to discuss. I'm realizing more and more that my biggest pet peeve with not just books, but also marketing, is when something is advertised with like a very snappy premise, like a very interesting log line, you know, that 30-second elevator pitch, and you're like, this is the plot of the book, and it's supposed to draw you in. I love those. It's really interesting how people come up with those and how people can condense the whole idea of a novel into a log line. What I don't like is when you pick up a book because of that log line and the book turns out to be nothing like that. A big example that I read recently was Magic for Liars. It was essentially about a detective murder mystery story set in a school setting, which, okay, that is what the book was. But it was advertised as like a noir, which is a style of film and storytelling. The book had no elements of noir. Noir doesn't just mean like detective. I know noir detective movies are like what people know of, but like noir does not just mean detective. It is a style of filmmaking and storytelling. It was also compared to The Secret History and The Magicians, and there was, in my opinion, nothing comparable. They didn't share the same genre. They were not the same themes. They were not even like similar stories or settings. So I had no idea why it was compared to those things. And it really ruined the story for me because due to the advertising, I expected it to be one thing and it was something completely different. And that happens a lot. I mean, that is what marketing is. It's supposed to draw you in, and whether it's a little bit of a fib or it like makes something seem more interesting, It doesn't matter to the marketers. The book has been sold. They don't care. But to me, as somebody who is picking up books due to recommendations, the fact that so many people and marketers condense a book down to, one log line, and that log line being super interesting, but it having nothing to do with the actual story, or like very little to do with the actual story, is what really irks me. It's a big pet peeve of mine, and I just wish we could do more things instead of that, so that we don't have to, I don't know. That's my big pet peeve rant. And how that compares to this book is, this was advertised, as I said before, as a revenge novel. This is a woman getting her revenge against a man who has wronged her. Now, when looking at this book, it looks like a standalone. It has nothing on it that makes it look like it's not a standalone. It just says, I don't know if it'll focus, it just says a novel. There's no numbers on the spine. It doesn't say that it's part of a series or, a franchise of books. On the inside where it says like also by this author, it doesn't say like in the series title or whatever. It just says novels, and then like it has like poetry and stuff. So it seems like these are all standalones. When I went to Storygraph to log this book, it says 4 souls, and then underneath it says Love Medicine number 7. This is the 7th in a series, but nothing on the book explains that. What it seems to be, I haven't obviously read the other books, but it seems that this is less of like a series, like a narrative series, and more of like a universe in which these books all belong to. So there's similar characters. This book references plot points from other books, like it's obviously a reference to another book. One of my favorite series, the Ashbury/Brookfield series by Jacqueline Moriarty, does the same thing. I read the second book without even realizing that it was part of a universe, and you do not have to read all of the books in order to understand them, because if it's referencing something from another book, it kind of gives a short explanation on that reference. And this book does the same thing. There were obviously references to other plot points in other books. I'm not going to hold that against this book just because I didn't realize that it was part of a bigger universe, because when it came to those plot points, the book does a good job of giving a short explanation of the reference and how it connects, why it's being brought up in this book, things like that. I'm not holding that against this book. I'm holding it against the marketing for not making this look more like, or mentioning anywhere else that this is part of a bigger universe, that there are other books about the same characters. But the writing is not bad for that. In fact, the writing is really good. I really like the way the author told her story. She's a poet, I think a poet by trade. So this had very lyrical, poetic writing, a lot of run-on sentences, which I'm a big fan of. I know for some people, they really don't like it, but I don't care if there's a lot of commas and that it the sentence keeps going on, or when there's short, snappy sentences or repetitive sentences. I like that. I find it fun. I like poets turned novelists. I think for most of them, they are really good. So I liked the way that the story was told. I liked the writing style, and I liked the framing device. So this is Fleur's story, but Fleur is not a narrator or a point of view character. This is narrated by Nanapush and what's her name? Polly Elizabeth. Two characters who know Fleur and are retelling their perspectives of the story. I really like that. I think it's interesting. I think it was done well to an extent, and I'll get into what I didn't like. But I feel like this author has a really good grasp of her characters. They all felt real. They all felt lived in. At least the narrative characters, the ones whose heads we were in, I could understand their relationships, not just to the other characters, but also to Fleur, specifically Polly Elizabeth. It was really well done. I really like that framing device, and I want to search out other books that have similar framing devices where the main character or the character whose story it is not the perspective character. I think that's really interesting, and it gives it this mysterious kind of I don't know, just interesting vibe. I really like that. Alrighty, now let me get into some of the things I don't like and why I can't really recommend this book, and why I gave it 2.75 stars, even if I liked the writing style. I'm going to start off by explaining the plot of this story. So we start off with a Nana Push chapter, and he is explaining Floor's what her mission is. It is to get revenge. She is traveling through the snow. She's got like no food. She's stealing boots because her moccasins have like been shredded from her walk, like they've worn through. She doesn't care. She has one goal in mind, and that is to get revenge on the man who stole her land. This man is a wealthy white settler who made his business, he's like a financial guy, but he made his business by marrying Native women and then like somehow getting out of the marriage, whether that's divorce or like, I don't know, something happening. And in that marriage, he gets all of the assets, meaning he gets all of their reservation land. It's like a legal loophole, and he's able to get all of that land, and he steals the trees. He cuts down the trees. He's like a lumber baron. He cuts down the trees, and he uses those trees to build this beautiful mansion, like huge, in-depth. I don't know what time period this is. Maybe in another book it explains it. I thought it was like solid 1800s, like late 1800s, 1870s, 1880s, something like that. I don't know why I thought that. Turns out it's more like 1920s, because there's like cars, and the man, what is it, John Mauser or something, he fought in a war with like trenches and gas. They don't say what war it is. They don't call it by a name. Due to my very limited war knowledge, I'm assuming it's World War I. I'm assuming it's the 1920s or the late teens, 19 teens. And then we get Polly Elizabeth. Polly Elizabeth is the sister-in-law of John James Mauser, and she explains how she hired Fleur to be the laundry maid. And she's like, oh, I couldn't have known that she would ruin our lives, the blah, 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 this and that. She talks about how Fleur got hired, how she snuck her way into the house. She also explains John James's marriage to her sister and why it was like unhappy, and how he is like a damaged man. And then Nana Push is describing how Fleur sneaks around the house, how she plans her revenge, how she, tries to find all of the boards that aren't squeaky so that she can sneak up on him and kill him. And she's about to do it. She plans to do it. John James says something that like captures her heart. He says that he is bound to her, that he will always be bound to her, that his soul was waiting for her. And because of that, she chickens out on killing him and instead marries him. Okay, which is fine. Interesting. It's interesting. There's no love. It's not like she fell in love with him. It's that she found a way to like use him, right? She found another way to get his revenge. Like she had to nurse him back to health. That's a whole plot point. He was like a sick, damaged man. So she nursed him back to health in order to kill him after he was healthy, so that he would feel that like hatred. I don't know. It was something weird. Not weird. It was actually very interesting. I liked that idea. We've learned that Fleur gets married to him and then has a child with him. All of that is through Polly Elizabeth's narration. She is very close to Fleur, or like ends up being very close to Fleur after he divorces her sister. Polly Elizabeth's sister. The reason I have such a difficult time remembering this is because that is the very first like third of the book, and then we get no mention of Fleur for a very long time. Nana Push goes into the history of Fleur's name. Apparently that was her mother's name, and so he has to go into the story about how her mother got the name Four Souls and like why it's a powerful name. I'm assuming that goes in more depth in a different book, and so there's just a chapter where he is describing that or explaining it, and he's also explaining how Fleur and the Pillager family is like strong, and she is a representation of that strength, which is good. That's cool, interesting, whatever. I don't know how to explain it. He then just goes into his own story. This book, Four Souls, is essentially two different stories in one. And I mean that literally, because the two chapters I'm going to talk about, it's like chapters 9 and 11 on the like legal copyright page. On this page, it says that those two chapters, 9 and 11, appear in a different form in another book. So I don't know what she means by like a different form, like if this was a rewrite, if she took a couple different parts from a different book and put them in this book. I don't know if this is meant to show that this book is happening at the same time as another book. But Nana Push, who before this has only been narrating Floor's story, suddenly starts talking about his wife and his troubles with his wife and how much he loves her, but this like silly tangent, that's what it is. It's a tangent. It's a full-on different story. He starts talking about how his wife is like in love with this idea of having linoleum, this like new flooring linoleum in their cabin. And so she does the unthinkable and like sells off part of the land in order to get this linoleum. And these two characters are like fighting. And then this guy starts talking about his like rival. And it starts off as this cute little like rivalry against old men. He's like, oh, this man has always been a pain in my butt. And I'm like, oh, this is like a grumpy old man getting mad at his neighbor. And then he's like, no, this man stole and ate my sister. He mentions that the man has turned into a monster in native folklore because of his dark magic and killed Nana Push's sister, which came out of nowhere. Like he's talking about this rivalry he has with this lifelong rivalry, and then this man is like responsible for the death of his sister. And apparently this man is flirting with Nana Push's wife, and he's afraid that this man, I think his name is Sashib, is going to steal Margaret with his dark medicine and like his dark love medicine. Nana Push goes to great lengths to like kill Sashib and almost kills Margaret. And then because he almost killed Margaret, she has this like vision to make a medicine dress, and she spends so much time and effort and care making this medicine dress. And Nana Push ends up stealing it, like putting it on and like getting drunk and stealing wine and doing like weird things, like weird. It seems farcical. That's all I can say. This is a farce. These few chapters are like such a farce compared to the very serious chapters of Floor and her marriage to the man who she's trying to get revenge on, and also having a child with like fetal alcohol syndrome. I forgot about that. That's a whole thing. Her child has fetal alcohol syndrome. And that story just comes to a halt to have this comedy of errors with Nana Push having to deliver like a very important speech at like a council meeting in a dress after like flashing a bunch of kids. It's weird. The whole story halts to have a second story. It definitely feels like filler chapters. Like, you know, like filler episodes in an anime? It feels like filler chapters where the story halts to have a fun little adventure. And it's funny. It's interesting. It's funny. And like, I like the relationship between Nana Push and Margaret. I think it's cute. I think it's this like old couple relationship. They've been together for years. They kind of annoy each other, but there's still love, and it's adorable. But like it has no place in this story. It really doesn't. For whatever reason, the author just decided to stop the story and have a completely different story. On that note, Polly Elizabeth also has a few different chapters. She does mention Floor more often. She talks to Mauser, the husband, the lumber baron, and she's talking to him about his history in the war, which is interesting. It's backstory for one of the characters in Floor's story. I get that. But he's talking about like why his manservant Fontaine like can't speak or something, or like, I don't know. It's weird. Speaking of Polly Elizabeth, she is interesting in the fact that like she's a racist white woman in, I guess, the 1920s, and she like hires this native woman to be a servant, and then the native woman ends up like taking everything from Polly Elizabeth and her sister. She then abandons her sister basically and helps to take care of the new child, like Floor's child, inserts herself back into the family even though she's got no relation to these people, and she ends up like becoming really close to Floor, and she keeps calling Floor her sister. And she says at one point, like, even if Floor has no one, or like if you divorce her or whatever, she'll still have me. She still has Polly Elizabeth, and it's cute. It's like sweet, okay, a nice relationship between these two characters. There's no end to that relationship. Mauser essentially loses all of his money. Fleur gets whatever she can out of the divorce, but the rest of it needs to be sold off, and he flees the country. Comes out of nowhere, really. I mean, it's mentioned a bit that he's losing money, but that plan comes out of nowhere. And Polly Elizabeth's last chapter is just her selling off Mauser's wares, all of the handkerchiefs and the knickknacks that he had, and she explains to the reader she has fallen in love with Fontaine. The weird thing about this is throughout the entire book she has hated him. She talks about how much she hates him, and then all of a sudden she's like, I fell in love with him. We've grown close. I have fallen in love with two of my servants. You know, Fleur was her servant, and she fell in love with her as like a sister, and now she has fallen in love with the manservant, Fontaine, who she hated. And that's literally the last chapter. That's the last time we ever see Polly Elizabeth. That's the last time she's ever brought up. Fleur doesn't mention her. Fleur doesn't care about her. Fleur comes back into the story finally. Nana Push and Margaret, like Margaret becomes a POV character all of a sudden, but Nana Push and Margaret talk about Fleur's return and how she's always been this like mysterious, smart, dedicated woman. She ends up winning her land back. Not the trees. She never gets revenge for the man who stole her trees, but while she was gone and married to this man, this rich man, her land was sold off, again, by a loophole. It wasn't allowed to be, but it was. And so she ends up winning her land back in a game of poker. This like barren, no trees land. And that's how the story ends. That is it. That is, obviously there's more to the story because it's in this universe of characters. There's this whole thing with Fleur's other child, Lulu. They keep referencing her. I know that this is a big section of other books within this character universe. That's why I haven't mentioned it and haven't brought it up as like a con against this book. Just because this book doesn't flesh out Lulu, I understand that it's fleshed out somewhere else. So I'm not holding it against this book. But everything else is so nonsensical. Like, why is this book the way it is? Why is there a tangent in the middle of this book for no reason? Why is this book advertised as Fleur's story? This book is called Four Souls. That is her name. Four Souls. Her name is Fleur. That was the name given to her by a white man. And then Four Souls is her like real name. She took her mother's name. It has nothing to do with the story at all. At the end of the story, Margaret, who is like a medicine woman or like at least knows a lot about like spiritual power and whatever, she tells Fleur that she needs to like cry, fully cry it out, and she gives her like this bath, this cleansing bath, and tells her that she's gonna have a new name. She needs to listen to the souls, listen to the spirits, listen to the world around her, and have her new name, because Four Souls and Fleur obviously are not like real names for her. Those are names that were given to her or taken by like another person. So she needs to find her new name. We never learn that, which is, I get, a literary device to like never learn. We also never learn Robin's real name in Babel, which I loved. I like that, where somebody has a new identity or a name that they are given that we never learn. It's a great literary device. It doesn't feel earned in this because we have a very little, like, we're just told everything about Fleur. We don't see it as a character. I don't know. This book just felt so weird. It is a literary novel, and it has that like classics vibe. You know, all those classics, those boring classics you were told to read in high school, and they have like really rich histories and backstories for random characters that do like one thing and it makes no sense and it stops the story for like a tangent. All of those really annoying, boring books in high school that you were forced to read, that's what this feels like. That's literally what this feels like. Classics are classics for a reason. A lot of people really enjoy those books. I don't. I really don't. You know, this was a small book. It was short. It's like 210 pages. So the fact that like 40% of it is not about Fleur's story at all, and it's not even something that ties into her story later on, felt so weird, felt wrong, felt like the author just wanted to fill out the story. So she added a second story into the middle of this book. And that's what I didn't like. That's why I rated this book a 2.75 out of 5 stars. That's why I can't really recommend this book. If you are a person who likes this series, go ahead. Totally read the rest of it. This book probably fits right in between 2 other books, I'm sure. But this book as a standalone, which it was advertised as, makes me not want to read the rest of the series if this is what her other books are like, where they just stop in the middle to like, I don't know. Maybe if I started with the first book, this would have been better. But I obviously didn't. I got this in a blind book date. I just did not have a good experience with this book. I didn't like it. I guess that's essentially what I'm coming down to. I didn't like it. I mean, I really liked the characters. Nana, Push, and Margaret, great. Polly Elizabeth, kind of funny. Liked her. Fleur felt like nothing. She seemed interesting, but she felt like not a character. So I didn't really connect with that. I think that's going to be it for me. I don't really have anything snappy or interesting to say. If you've read Louise Erdrich's other books, did you like them? Do you think that the other books work better as standalones? I might read her poetry. I really liked the writing style of this book, so reading her poetry would probably be more interesting to me, or her nonfiction books. But I think I'm gonna stay away from like the Love Medicine series. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any recommendations for other books, put them down in the comments, and like and subscribe, I guess. Thank you, bye! I'm so hungry.